finished skirt, you'll see that it is face up. It's on the table face up. So this is where I can see my pockets. Okay, and I'm going to take my bodice. This is where we're going to sew the skirt to the bodice. So I'm taking my bodice, and my bodice is going to be inside out. Okay, so that means that the print side and the print side are going to be facing each other, just like this. Okay, so I'm laying it right on top, waist to waist. All right, now I'm going to start pinning. So the first thing I want to do is I want to pin the notch. Let me make a mark so that you can see this. This is center back. Okay, so that center back notch here is going to line up with this center back notch on the skirt. So I'm lining that up, and again I'm going to pin up and down, not sideways. Then I'm going to match the side seam of the bodice to the side seam of the skirt. And I'm doing it the same way that I've done before, is I'm going to line it up so that the seams match about an inch below, and then just kind of roll that up so it matches all the way up for about an inch. Now what I like to do with this skirt and bodice is I like to put pins on each side of the seam allowance. So it's pinning the seam allowances down on both sides so that they don't flip around, and it really helps it so it doesn't move. Okay, the next is we're going to match we're matching this notch right here. That's my facing. Okay, that's where my facing actually turns back on my skirt. Okay, this is the facing of my bodice, and it's folded back right now, but we're going to open it up. So we want it flat. So they're both flat. So we're going to match that notch with this seam. We're going to match this notch here with this seam and pin. Just like that. And then pin. Okay, and then also you'll see that the edge, we've folded this back and stitched. We folded the skirt facing back and stitched, so now they match. So we're going to just pin right there as well. Okay, one of the questions that always comes up is, but my darts don't match my pockets or something like that. Well, they're not supposed to. They're just there. Okay, so we just want to make sure that that is just laying flat, that the waist isn't bigger than the skirt or the skirt isn't bigger than the waist. It should lay flat. So we're going to pin at the dart so that that holds that dart down so it doesn't fold the wrong way. Now we're going to do the pinning on the other side. Okay, so now this is the side seam on the other side of the skirt. Again, I'm lining up the side seam of the bodice with the side seam of the skirt and rolling that up and then pinning on each side of the seam. Helps hold it down better. Then I'm going to match. I'm going to open up my facing on my bodice, make sure my facing on my skirt's open, and I'm going to line up this seam right here with this notch and pin. Okay, and then my raw edges will match as well. Or they're not, my clean edges, I should say, will match, and I'll pin right there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam, starting here, going all the way and ending here. So let's walk over there. Okay, so everything is still folded, pretty much laid, the bodice is still laying on top of the skirt. Okay, we want to keep that nice and flat. Okay, we're going to start at this end, take the pin out, and we're starting right on the edge. We're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam. So I'm going to back tack. Okay, and I'm just going to keep on going and get the pin out. Now, I'm always making sure that my seams are matching, so the 2 raw edges are matching, and I don't have half my skirt tucked up underneath where I end up sewing it. Okay, my dart, I want to make sure that it stays folded correctly. Always have a flat area to work with by just moving all this fabric out of the way. Okay, so now I'm getting to my side seam here. So I'm going to sew a little bit closer to my pin. I'm going to take the pins out, and then I'm going to sew right across. Okay, my needle is down. I'm going to keep that and then start readjusting again, making sure that the edges, the raw edges, are on top of each other. Make sure that my back dart is now still folded towards center. Okay, take the pin out. Now remember, this dart, this back dart is folding the other way. It's folding towards center. So we want to make sure that it stays that way. Okay, so now we're getting to the other side seam. So I'm going to sew real close to that pin. Then I'm going to take both pins out. Make sure that my raw edges are laying on top of each other. Sew right over that. Okay, so now I want to show you something, what happened. Okay, remember I said you don't have to stitch the pocket down at the waist? Well, let me show you what happened. Notice that the pocket actually folded, the pocket opening, it folded over. Okay, so you want to make sure that your pocket is still laying flat on the waist before you sew over that. Otherwise, if I sew like this, then this is what it's going to look like. As you can see, there's my waist and here's my pocket with that hanging out. Okay, that's not pretty, so we're not going to do that. So what we're going to do is make sure that that is still flat. So again, if you want to do your understitching or your stay stitching in that area, then fine, that's great. Okay. This dart right here needs to make sure that it's folded towards the center. Okay, I'm going to take that pin out. And then I'm at the other end, so I'm going to back tack when I'm done. And my skirt is now sewed to my bodice. But before I go any further, I want to take a look. So I'm going to open it up. Okay, what I want to check is my side seams in line? Okay, this one is actually off, and I'm going to draw just a little bit so you can see where that's at. So it's off by 1/8 of an inch. Now, in the industry, this is tolerance, and that's okay if you were doing inspections on garments in the industry. Technically, it should be perfectly perfect, but nothing is ever perfect. So if it's off only by 1/8 of an inch, it's still within tolerance. If it's off by 1/4 of an inch or more, then it's out of tolerance and it's not good. Okay, so let's take a look at the other one. Okay, now the other one came out just right. So you can see how that one is fine. Okay, I have no tucks, no pleats, everything is nice and flat. Okay, so that's finished. Now, there is something that I want to show you before we stop this video. Okay, when the skirt is, in fact, let's go to the table and I'll show you. It's much easier at the table. When the dress is done, you have your facing is folded back, right? And then it's pressed, you press it back and it's nice and pretty, okay? But it's never gonna really stay that way. This is always gonna be flip-flopping around until you put button and buttonholes in it. Now, we're not gonna be doing that because we don't have buttonhole machines. Now, you guys do at school or at home, but have a buttonhole attachment. But normally we don't add buttonholes to this. So we don't want this flip-flopping around. So I'm gonna show you how to keep this facing here so that it's sitting and that it's stationary to the dress without seeing any stitching. Okay, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna fold the skirt and the bodice so that they're on top of each other, just like the way we sewed it, okay, when we first got it sewed, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna fold, so right where this seam is, right here, okay, you're gonna fold that under. So what you're doing is, actually, you know what? Let me do that in an easier way. Let's flip it over. Lay your dress so that the bodice is on the table and the skirt is on top. Okay? Bodice on the table, skirt is on top. So see the facings? Right here, we're going to lay the facings so they're flat on top of each other, just for a little bit right there, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your facings and you're just gonna fold them over, both of them over. So do you see what I'm doing is I'm just folding them over so that my seam here, where the understitching is right where it's folded now. Okay, do you see that? So I'm going to do that one more time. This is laying flat. This is my blouse, this is the top of my dress, and that's the facing, it's open. This is my skirt, and this is the facing that's open. They're laying on top of each other. Okay? I'm going to fold both pieces over on top of the waist, just like that, so that the understitching stitch is right where it's folded. So right on that fold right there is the understitching stitch. And then what I want to do is I'm just going to pin this down. So I'm pinning all the pieces down right here. Just pin that down. Okay? Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So again, the body is underneath, the bodice. The skirt is on top, okay? The two facings are right on top of each other. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just fold this over. Fold it over so it's laying on top of the waist and the edge stitch line or the understitching line is right on the fold. And then I'm going to pin. All right, so now we're going to sew. I'm going to show you this. This is really nice way of doing this. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. There's my two pieces that are folded. There it is. So do you see where my stitching is, where I've already stitched? I'm going to start right on the edge here. And I'm going to stitch right on top of that stitch. Right on top of that stitch. All the way to the edge here. And then just back tack. Okay? So what I'm doing is stitching it down, okay, just like this. So that's all stitched down. Now, when I take the bodice and the skirt and I open it up, the seam, the waist seam is facing up, which it's supposed to. Okay, so you won't be pressing that open. And this is stitched down. It's not going anywhere. Okay, it is stitched down and it's clean. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, this time I'm going to start just right here at the fold or at the edge of the facing. Okay, right on the waist, back tack, and then sew right on top of that seam right there. Right on top of that seam you already sewed. Right on top. Okay, clip all your threads. Okay, so again, there's my bodice. Here's my skirt. I'm going to take my bodice facing and my skirt facing, and I'm just going to pull them apart. Once you pull them apart, you've got that nice, beautiful front, nice and even. You have this attached. It's beautiful. Okay, so the next video is the hem, and we're done.